In 476 AD, the Western Roman Empire, the most powerful civilization in history, collapsed. The official story blames barbarian invasions and political instability. But what if the real reason was financial? What if the same economic mistakes that destroyed Rome are being repeated right now by every major economy on Earth? This isn't just historical curiosity. This is a warning. The patterns are identical, the mechanisms are the same, and the ending is inevitable unless we learn from Rome's mistakes. Before we dive in, drop your country in the comments. And if you're ready to see how ancient history predicts modern economic collapse, hit that subscribe button. So how did the richest empire in history go bankrupt? In 27 BC, Augustus became the first Roman emperor. The Roman economy was based on sound money, the silver denarius coin, made of about 95% pure silver. The value was in the metal itself. This forced fiscal discipline. If the government wanted to spend more, it had to tax more or spend less. It couldn't just create money out of thin air. For 200 years, this system worked beautifully. Rome prospered. But then, in 64 AD, Emperor Nero faced a problem. He needed to rebuild Rome after a fire and fund the military. Instead of raising taxes, he chose to debase the currency. He reduced the silver content of the denarius to 85% but kept its official value. This is the first step toward disaster. When you debase a currency, you can mint more coins from the same amount of silver, giving the government more to spend. But people aren't stupid. They realize the coins have less silver, so they raise prices. This is inflation. The government then needs more money to pay those higher prices, so it debases the currency again, which causes more inflation, requiring more debasement. It's a death spiral. By 260 AD, the denarius was only 5% silver. By 270 AD, it was less than 2%, just copper with a thin silver coating, the ancient equivalent of fiat currency. The consequences were catastrophic. Prices increased 1,000% in a single century. Imagine a loaf of bread that costs $3 today suddenly costing $60,000. That's what Romans experienced. Savings were destroyed, the middle class was annihilated, but the wealthy, they did fine. They held assets like land and property, which maintain value. Currency debasement always destroys the middle class and transfers wealth to the elite. It happened in Rome, and it's happening now. In 301 AD, Emperor Diocletian tried to fix this with the Edict on Maximum Prices. He set legal price limits on over 1,000 goods and services. The penalty for violation? Death. But price controls are a disaster. Producers stop producing if they're forced to sell at a loss. Goods disappear, shortages become severe. Price controls never work because they don't address the root cause. Currency debasement. Sound familiar? The United States did the same thing in the 1970s. President Nixon implemented wage and price controls to fight inflation. They failed. As the currency collapsed, Rome's taxes increased dramatically. By the late Empire, farmers were paying up to 70% of their harvest in taxes. But high taxes in a collapsing economy don't increase revenue. They destroy economic activity. Farmers abandoned their land, cities depopulated. The tax base shrank, so the government raised rates even higher. The spiral accelerated. And what about Rome's military? The legions were expensive. As the currency debased, a soldier's pay became worthless. Recruitment became difficult. Rome's solution? Hire barbarian mercenaries. But these soldiers had no loyalty. When Rome could no longer pay, they turned on the empire. The fall of Rome wasn't a barbarian invasion from outside. It was a revolution from within by the soldiers Rome hired because it couldn't afford its own citizens. The parallels to today are terrifying. The US dollar used to be backed by gold. But in 1971, President Nixon cut the tie to gold. The dollar became a fiat currency. Since then, it has lost 85% of its purchasing power, just like the denarius. The US money supply has increased 35-fold since 1971, while the economy has only grown 10-fold. That gap is inflation. In 1971, the median home cost 2.5 times the median income. Today, it's 5.6 times. Homes didn't get more valuable. The dollar became worthless. And the government's response? The same as Rome's. When inflation recently surged, they blamed corporate greed and threatened price controls. They are addressing the symptoms, not the cause. The problem isn't prices, it's the currency. Economic collapse always precedes political and military collapse. When your currency becomes worthless and your middle class is destroyed, your empire is finished. The story of Rome isn't ancient history, it's a blueprint for what's coming. Think about the American dream back in 1971. A single income could buy a house, raise a family, and save for a comfortable retirement. That dream was real for everyday people. Fast forward to today. Even with two incomes, many families can barely afford rent, let alone a home. Young people are drowning in student debt, and retirement feels like a distant fantasy. What happened? It's not that people stopped working hard. It's that the value of their hard work, paid in dollars, is being systematically destroyed. Your labor is worth the same, but the money you earn buys less and less each year. This is called currency debasement, and it's the silent thief robbing the middle class. The wealthy get this. They don't hoard cash. They own assets, stocks, real estate, businesses, things that hold their value when money loses its own. Warren Buffett, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, their wealth isn't in bank accounts. It's in assets that protect them from this decay. But what about teachers, nurses, engineers, and small business owners? They save cash. They trust the system. And just like the middle class of ancient Rome, who were ruined by the debasement of their silver denarius, they are being wiped out. The wealth gap in America today is staggering, even worse than in ancient Rome. The top 1% owns more than the bottom 90% combined. This isn't just capitalism, it's the direct result of inflating the money supply. When you print money, asset prices soar, but wages lag far behind. The rich get richer, and the middle class gets crushed. This was Rome's story, and now it's America's. Let's look at the US government's finances. The national debt is a mind-boggling $34 trillion. That's over 123% of our entire economy's output, a level eerily similar to Rome's just before its collapse. And it's getting worse. The debt is growing faster than the economy itself. Interest payments alone are approaching $2 trillion a year. That's more than we spend on defense, more than Medicare. $2 trillion every year just to pay interest, not even touching the principal. And where does that money come from? The government doesn't have it. They have to borrow it, which just adds to the debt and increases future interest payments. It's an exponential, unsustainable spiral identical to what Rome experienced in its final centuries. They kept borrowing to pay interest, and they kept debasing their currency to fund it all, accelerating their own demise. The US is in the same spiral. The only question is, for how long? Now, consider the tax burden. For a middle-income American, when you add up all federal, state, and local taxes, income, payroll, sales, property, gas, and all the hidden fees, you're looking at a tax rate of 40 to 50%. That's approaching Roman levels. And even that isn't enough to cover government spending. So what do? They print money. The Federal Reserve created $5 trillion out of thin air between 2020 and 2022. That's not creating wealth, it's diluting it. It's a hidden tax called inflation. It decimates your savings and your purchasing power, hitting the poor and middle class the hardest. The wealthy, with their assets, are shielded. Everyone else is exposed. Just like in Rome, the government blames corporations, greed, and foreign powers. But the truth is simple. They're spending money they don't have and printing it to cover the gap. This destroys the currency. It happened to Rome, and it's happening to America. This economic decay has dire consequences for our military. The US has the most powerful military in history, but it's incredibly expensive. And it's facing a recruitment crisis. Why? A private in the army makes about $25,000 a year. That's below the poverty line in many cities. You can make more at a warehouse. Why risk your life for pay that doesn't even cover rent? Rome faced the same problem. As their currency became worthless, military pay couldn't keep up. Roman citizens stopped enlisting, so Rome hired foreign mercenaries. The US is moving in a similar direction, increasingly relying on contractors and offering citizenship for service. When a country can't afford to pay its own citizens to defend it, it outsources security. And when the currency finally collapses, those hired hands have no loyalty. This is how empires fall apart from within. Socially, America is fracturing, just like Rome did. The gap between rich and poor is the widest it's been in over a century. The wealthy live in a separate world of gated communities and private services, while the poor depend on government aid. The middle class is vanishing, squeezed from both sides. Rome saw the same stratification. As its economy failed, society split into a tiny elite and a vast dependent underclass. The government pacifies the masses with bread and circuses. In our time, it's welfare programs and endless digital entertainment. The poor are distracted, the rich are isolated, and the middle class, the backbone of any strong nation, is dying. Politically, economic collapse breeds authoritarianism. As instability grows, governments respond with more control. We see it in the rising political polarization, the collapsing trust in institutions, and the growing willingness to use force to achieve political ends. America is fracturing, with states increasingly ignoring federal authority, much like Roman provinces asserted their independence as the central government weakened. In its final years, Rome's currency became so worthless that trade reverted to barter. The monetary economy collapsed. People fled the cities. Society reorganized into a feudal system, not by choice, but by necessity. Today, our new feudal lords might be the tech giants who control our data and commerce, and the billionaires buying up land and resources, creating self-sufficient networks for a world after the dollar. The fall of Rome wasn't a single event, it was a process. The final sacks of the city weren't by foreign invaders, but by former soldiers and allies who had been betrayed by the collapsing economy. They took by force what they were owed. The empire wasn't conquered, it rotted from the inside out, hollowed out by currency debasement. The parallels are undeniable. The technology is different. The names have changed, but the fundamental mechanics of decline are the same. America is following the same path, and if we don't change course, we are headed for the same destination. Ever wondered if the United States is following the same path as the fallen Roman Empire? It's not just a vague theory. The parallels are measurable, and the economic indicators are striking. Let's look at the hard data. First, currency debasement. It took Rome about 200 years to devalue its silver currency, the denarius, by over 90%. That's a debasement rate of about 0.5% per year. Now consider the US dollar. Since 1971, it has lost 85% of its value. That's a rate of 1.6% per year, 3 times faster than Rome's decline. The collapse is accelerating. Second, the debt-to-GDP ratio. At its peak, Rome's government debt was estimated to be around 100 to 150% of its GDP, a burden that proved unsustainable. Where is America today? Our debt-to-GDP ratio is 123%, and it's still climbing. We are firmly in Rome's collapse range. Third, military overextension. Rome maintained about 450,000 soldiers across its vast empire. America has 1.3 million active-duty personnel stationed across the globe in roughly 800 military bases. While Rome's empire was limited, America's military responsibility covers the entire planet. The overextension is even greater. Fourth, infrastructure decay. In its final centuries, Rome couldn't afford to maintain its famous roads and aqueducts. Today, the American Society of Civil Engineers gives U.S. infrastructure a grade of C-. Our bridges, roads, and water systems are crumbling. The richest country in history can't maintain its basic infrastructure just like Rome. Fifth, wealth concentration. In late Rome, a few senators owned vast estates while the masses were impoverished. In America, the top 1% now own more wealth than the bottom 90% combined. This isn't just inequality, it's a level of wealth concentration that mirrors the final days of the Roman oligarchy. And finally, declining life expectancy. Archaeological evidence shows that as Rome declined, so did the health and lifespan of its people. In a shocking modern parallel, US life expectancy has fallen for the first time in a century, dropping 2.4 years in just 2 years. The people in the wealthiest nation on Earth are dying younger. These aren't coincidences. They are the classic symptoms of systemic collapse, and they've been pointed out by serious scholars for decades. In 1984, historian Paul Kennedy warned that empires fall when military overextension outpaces their economic base. In 2000, Colin Murphy's book Are We Rome? Drew direct parallels. In 2012, Niall Ferguson described our institutional decay as the Great Degeneration. Now, you might hear objections. America has better technology. But technology didn't save Rome from currency debasement, and it won't save us either. America has nuclear weapons. True, but nukes don't stop economic collapse. They just make the aftermath unimaginably more dangerous. America is a democracy, not an empire. That's a semantic game. We function like an empire, and democracies are often worse at managing long-term debt. Then there's the dollar's status as the world's reserve currency. This has delayed the inevitable by creating artificial demand for dollars. But this status is now being actively challenged by nations like China and Russia. When the world stops using the dollar, the fall will be swift, and unlike Rome's collapse, it will be global. So what does the timeline look like? Rome's fall took about 400 years. America is 53 years into its decline, but we're moving 3 times faster. We are now entering the phase of desperate government measures, price controls, and higher taxes, just as Emperor Diocletian did. The next stages are military deterioration and loss of border control. The final collapse could happen sooner than we think. So what can you do? The lessons from Rome are clear. First, don't hold your wealth in currency that's being destroyed. Own real assets, real estate, gold, things that have intrinsic value. Second, reduce your dependence on fragile systems. Develop practical skills, build local community networks, and become more self-reliant. Third, understand the times. Recognize that we are in a period of decline and plan accordingly. This isn't about despair. It's about being realistic and prepared. Finally, preserve knowledge. In the dark ages that followed Rome, monasteries saved what they could. We must do the same. Don't assume all information will remain online forever. The parallels are undeniable, and the trajectory is clear. It's time to learn from history, not repeat its mistakes blindly. All right, let's get real. Can America avoid Rome's fate? Is this collapse inevitable? Theoretically, yes. Here's what it would take. First, return to sound money. End the Federal Reserve's power to print unlimited cash. Tie the dollar to something real, like gold, silver, or a basket of commodities, something with tangible value. This would force the government to be disciplined with its spending and protect your savings from being devalued. But will this happen? No. Politicians won't give up their magic money tree. No more bailouts, no more stimulus checks, no more buying votes with printed currency. They'd never agree to that. Second, slash government spending. I'm talking a 40 to 50% cut. Eliminate entire departments, cut military spending, and end corporate welfare. This would balance the budget and stop the mountain of debt from growing. Will this happen? Again, no. Half the country relies on government checks in some form: Social Security, Medicare, federal contracts. No politician would survive proposing cuts to those benefits. Third, restructure entitlements, raise the retirement age, means test benefits, and reduce payouts to make programs like Social Security and Medicare sustainable. It's a mathematical necessity. These programs are going bankrupt, and by the mid-2030s, benefits will be automatically cut by 20 to 25% unless something changes. Will this happen? Probably not until a major crisis forces it, and by then, the cuts will be chaotic and painful. So the answer is no. America probably can't avoid Rome's fate because the political system is built to resist the very changes needed to save it. It's the same trap Rome fell into. Every emperor knew devaluing the currency was destroying the empire, but they did it anyway. They needed the money now, and the consequences could wait. The system always rewards short-term thinking. So what did this collapse actually look like for an ordinary person? Imagine you're a Roman merchant around 400 AD. You've worked hard your whole life, saved your money, and built a business. Then, overnight, the currency becomes worthless. Your life savings can't even buy a loaf of bread. Your business collapses. You're forced to abandon the city, head to the countryside, and work on some rich guy's estate just for food and protection. You lose everything: your wealth, your status, your freedom. You've become a serf. This is what currency collapse does. It wipes out the middle class. Now imagine you're a wealthy Roman landowner. You saw the collapse coming. You converted your cash into real assets like land and productive farms. When the system fell apart, you negotiated with the new powers. You kept your land in exchange for tribute. Your family didn't just survive, you thrived, becoming the new nobility. This is the lesson. In a collapse, wealth held in currency disappears. Wealth held in real assets survives. Why do you think today's billionaires are buying up farmland and building self-sufficient compounds? They've read history. They're preparing. Are you? After Rome fell, Europe plunged into the Dark Ages. Population dropped, cities emptied, trade stopped, and knowledge was lost. It took 500 years to get back to Roman levels of prosperity. When a complex civilization collapses, you don't just lose the government. You lose everything: supply chains, medicine, rule of law. What does a post-collapse America look like? Probably regional fragmentation, a severe drop in living standards, and political chaos. It won't be peaceful. Why do empires keep making the same mistakes? It's called temporal discounting. Humans are wired to value immediate rewards over long-term consequences. Every politician knows the debt is a ticking time bomb, but cutting spending means losing the next election. So the spending continues, the debt grows, and the currency is devalued. Everyone knows how it ends, but no one has the political courage to stop it. This pattern is universal. Every single fiat currency in history has eventually failed. Every single one. The US dollar has been a fiat currency since 1971. Its time is running out. The reckoning is coming, not because of an external enemy, but because our system is built on the lie that you can print unlimited money with no consequences. Rome believed that lie. America believes that lie. So here's my question for you. If America is following the exact same path as Rome, why do so many people pretend it's not happening? Drop your answer in the comments. Let me know if you see the parallels. Hit that subscribe button for more hidden history that explains our world today. Share this with someone who needs to understand what's coming. Because Rome wasn't destroyed by barbarians, it was destroyed from within by currency debasement. And America's greatest threat isn't China or Russia, it's the Federal Reserve and fiscal insanity. The pattern is clear. The only question is, will you be ready?